Have you ever asked yourself, is my kid normal? Why the heck do they do what they do? My kid chews on the banisters or on their fingers, constantly putting things in their mouth, or my kid can't sit still. No matter what we do, no matter what we try, they are constantly moving. Or maybe it feels like your kid just never listens. It doesn't matter if you ask them nicely. It doesn't matter. They're just constantly jumping on the furniture. They're jumping on the table. They're climbing things. No matter what you do, it's like they can never get their energy out. Or maybe you have a kid that picks up things and smells them before they use them or do anything with them. Or maybe you have a kid that's super picky with their eating. Have you ever wondered, is my kid normal? Is this strange behavior normal or okay? We're going to be talking about that today. And if that is a question you have ever asked yourself and not really wanted to admit that you've asked yourself, then this is for you. And anytime I ask parents about their biggest struggle in handling difficult behavior or challenging behavior, I always get emails back about, I don't even know if this is normal. This is going to sound crazy. I don't even know if this is something to worry about, but we can't get a hold of it. Or I feel like my kid can't make friends. They struggle to make friends. They're always on top of each other. My kids can't keep their hands off of other people no matter what we do. And so it just kind of, it's always growing and growing, or you're dealing with tons of meltdowns and they're not necessarily tantrums, but you can't figure out exactly what it is. So we're going to be talking about this today. We're going to be talking about what is normal, first of all, and why can't my kid be normal? So first I want to address the elephant in the room about normal, right? So first and foremost, I want to address the elephant in the room. Normal is overrated. I am going to repeat that. Normal is overrated. Is your kid normal? Probably not. And why can't they be normal? Because they're them. They are uniquely them. And if you've been here for very long, you know we are all about embracing our kids for who they are, understanding them, and changing our lens in the way we see them. And so the very first thing that you as a parent, a teacher, or a therapist has to do to be able to get to the bottom of this strange behavior is you have to swap what you think about that behavior. You have to stop seeing it as abnormal. You have to stop shoulda, woulda, coulda. You have to stop thinking about the gap between where other kids are and where your kid is. You have to stop comparing your imperfect life with your friend's perfect life. Okay? Normal is overrated. I'm going to say it one more time. Normal is overrated. So that's my tip number one. If you get nothing else from this, number one is normal is overrated. I want you to embrace your child's uniqueness. That's number one. I want you to embrace your child's uniqueness. Now, number two is there is always a reason for behavior. Always a reason for behavior. We believe that behavior is communication. We believe that what you are seeing on the top, the picking, the biting of the nails, the chewing on things. My son once chewed his brother's toenails off. That's how strange and weird the behavior is. I once had a kid in one of my classrooms who would sniff, lick, and then use her crayons. I also had someone who constantly rubbed their clothes. Guess who that was? It was me growing up. I constantly was rubbing my legs, my clothes, and I actually had people think that something was wrong with me or that I was obsessed with touching myself, but that wasn't it. That wasn't it. There was a reason for that behavior. So there is always a reason for behavior. And today we're going to hone in on one reason for that behavior. There are 6 that we have discovered, but there is one that we're going to hone in on today, and that is sensory. We're going to be taking a look at behavior from a sensory lens. So everybody put that on, that sensory lens on. And I'm just curious, of those of you that are here, how many of you have heard of this word sensory or sensory processing or sensory awareness or sensory processing disorder? There's so many other terms out there. And I'm just curious, how many of you have heard that before? Because I'll tell you the truth, when I was teaching, when I was a parent, before I started diving into this, I did not know what that was. I had never heard it. I had never heard of it. This was 7 to 10 years ago. I did not know what this meant. And I was always told that there were 5 senses and that they just kind of, they're for learning. It's you see things, you hear things, you smell things, you touch things, and you taste things. That's what I had always believed and what I had been told to be true. But I had not really heard what this was. And then once I became aware of it, oh my gosh, my world opened up. But over the last 7 years, what I have found is if you are in the know of sensory, you probably have a kid with strange behavior. You probably have a kid who has a diagnosis. You probably know someone, or you are a professional, or you work with people who are kids who have sensory needs. And so I found that there are a lot of misconceptions around sensory. Right? So we're going to be talking about that. But for those of you that have not learned anything about the word sensory, you don't know what I'm talking about. If you are new to sensory, if you could just let me know in the comments so I know that I'm not preaching to the choir here, because it is okay to not know about sensory. So if you've never heard the term before, go ahead. So if you're a newbie and you don't really want to, out yourself, it is okay. Right? But I want you to know you are in the right place, and we are here to help you understand sensory. And we see that when our students go through Calm the Chaos, many times it's the first time they've ever heard that word, because it's not something that's readily available to all parents. It's not something that's readily taught in schools. Should be, but it's not. And so here we're going to go into some of what you might see. I'm not going to go into all the senses. We've got some other support for that. But right now, what I'm going to do is just talk about what you may be seeing on the outside and what sensory need could be behind the surface, right? Could be behind that. So number 1 is jumping or needing movement. So I'm going to go ahead, share my screen. Well, that's tiny. There we go. All right. So I want to talk about some of the things that you could see on the surface. Like I said, there we go. You guys getting that? Woo, getting big, yeah. There we go. And we'll also send over a link so that you can grab the sensory posters. Those of you that are on our email list, you might have already gotten an email about this. All right, so understanding sensory. What you might see a child that is overreacting. They're behaving badly. They're labeled as the bad kid. They might be refusing. They might be shying away. But really, they may just be sensitive to the loud noises or the movement or the overwhelmed by the amount of things that are happening. And they might be trying to block it out or retreat away from it. Number 2, your child might be jumping on the furniture, moving nonstop, or climbing everything. Well, what might be under the surface is actually that their sensory systems are either over or under responsive, and they might have that increased need for movement. We call that a vestibular need, and they're always on the go trying to meet that need. They also could be asking for proprioceptive input, which is that need for body awareness and body squeezes and pressure. They may be having meltdowns over putting on their socks and shoes, and they don't like wearing clothes, or they're bothered by some fabrics. But really, it could be that the feel of their socks and their shoes, or even the type of carpet, might be incredibly uncomfortable and hurt your child's senses and their tactile sense. Maybe they're putting everything in their mouth, or they're a picky eater. Well, some kids crave oral stimulations while others avoid it at all costs because there's so many sensitivities to texture, to taste, to smells, and it makes mealtime and other times during the day so incredibly difficult. Or maybe your child is covering their ears and they're complaining that it's just too loud, or they're having meltdowns when things are loud. Or maybe they are the loud kid. They're the one that's constantly making noise. And yes, they can be both. And so this is typically because they are sensitive to sound, or they're trying to avoid others, and they might be seeking out that noise. And they're trying to avoid it, where some of them are seeking out that noise and trying to create that noise on their own because, one, it can be incredibly calming for them and soothing for them because maybe one of their other senses is overloaded and overwhelmed. You might have a kid who is crawling all over people, constantly too close, constantly in people's personal space, always touching everything. But what's really going on under the surface is this child might be struggling with their body awareness. They might really struggle with that need for proprioceptive input, or they might be under-responsive of their proprioceptive input. And so they might not have that ability to recognize that personal space, right? They might not even realize, or they might be a leaner, right? Or you might have a kid who covers their eyes, they squint, they look down, they don't really use eye contact, or maybe they have a hard time focusing. They're constantly looking all over the place, or they are addicted to screens. How many of you guys, that sounds familiar? Well, they could be overstimulated visually, or easily distracted. It also could be providing them input that is calming to their sensory systems and to their body. And so they are attracted to it, and they'll follow the lights, they'll watch the lights, they'll watch the movement. And that could be a big thing. I chewed all my pencils, I chewed all my cap lids, I chewed my hair, I chewed my clothing. That was me growing up. That was me growing up. So not only have I dug into why my kids struggle, why the kids I worked with in school struggled, why the kids of the parents that I help now struggled, I struggled, and I thought I was so weird and not normal, right? So that brings me back to point number one, is normal is overrated. Point number two is all behavior is communication. There's always a reason for behavior. So I'm curious, out of those, did you hear something that you were able to shift the way you currently see behavior into a new need, into a new reason why your child might be doing those behaviors? Did you hear something? I'd love to know. All right, that brings us to step three. Step three is you want to take time to truly understand sensory, because there is a lot of information out there. 7 years ago when I got started, almost 8 years ago when I got started learning about sensory, there was almost nothing out there. There was a couple of amazing books, and they still are staples. Out of Sync Child and Raising a Sensory Smart Child. Those were great. Fantastic. They are staples and, dare I say, Bibles in the sensory world. But that was about it. There wasn't a whole lot of other stuff out there. And if you Googled, there wasn't a lot of information out there. It was really hard to find information. But now, if you were to go and search sensory processing, what is sensory processing? What is sensory? What are sensory issues? Does my child have sensory issues? Is my child's behavior sensory? You are going to be inundated with information. Some of it fantastic and some of it not. Some of it amazingly clear and some of it super confusing. And so I want to dispel a couple of the myths that are out there about sensory processing. I'm going to go up to the myths. It also comes with other things that I'm going to cover in some other lives. So make sure that you are following Lemon Lime Adventures and getting notifications of our lives, or you're signing up for our newsletter so you get notifications when we turn these into blog posts. Okay, so myths. We're going to talk about 7 myths that happen. Ooh, I wonder if it's possible for me to hide the reality. Boom. All right. Let's talk about these. All right. Number 1 is that, let's do this real fast. That's fine. Okay. So number 1 myth is that your child has to be sensitive to everything to be considered to have sensory issues, meaning that they cry over the smallest thing, meaning that they don't like their clothes, meaning that they don't like to eat food. And maybe your kid's not sensitive over things. So the truth is that we all have sensory preferences. We all have sensory needs. The easiest way to describe this is this way. How many of you guys love roller coasters? Now, when I said the word roller coaster, some of you were like, heck yeah, like give me a roller coaster, Dana. I cannot wait. Cannot wait until we open up theme parks again and we go back on roller coasters. But some of you immediately thought, no way in HE double hockey sticks am I getting on a roller coaster. I do not like them. I get car sick just by reading in the car. Like, no way. Don't like movement. Well, that is a sensory preference. That is a need or desire for vestibular input. And that is a push away because you're over-responsive to vestibular input. That right there is a sensory preference. I got another one for you. How many of you guys are parents, teachers, or therapists, and you have been in a classroom or a home with lots of kids, and all of a sudden your kids are touching you, and they're patting you, and they're touching your body, and all of that, right? Do you like it? Do you like when you get touched? Do you crave that touch? Do you enjoy that touch? Or does it make you want to scream inside because you are too touched out? That is a sensory preference. That is your sensory preference. You don't have to have a sensory issue. You don't have to be sensitive to everything to have preferences. Okay, so let's move into the next one. There are only 5 senses. Wrong. Like, let's stop that myth. There are not 5 senses. There's actually 14 to 21 senses that we have in our body. There are 8 that we use on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to go through these really, really fast. So you either want to take notes or grab the poster set. And we do have a kit on the back end of that poster set that will explain these senses as well. So we've got our 8 senses. Okay, so we've got the normal 5. Let's see if I can do this without looking. So we've got sight, sound. So we've got your sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, right? Those are normal. Those are the ones we all know. The other 3 are vestibular, your need for movement, and proprioceptive, your body awareness, your awareness of where your body is in space, and interoceptive. There's not a lot of information out there about interoception, but it is so powerful because this is your internal cues about what your body is telling you. If you're getting overheated, if you have to go to the bathroom, if you are hungry, if you are tired, if you are getting upset or frustrated, it is your gauge, and it sends signals to your body to say, hey, you're either getting this way or you're going this way, getting too high or too low. So super, super important to know about all 8 senses. Even in Sensory Processing 101, we didn't include interoception because we didn't know enough about it. It wasn't as known. Okay. So it's still really, really important. Okay, that this has nothing you can do. Okay, sorry. The next myth is you just need to give more sensory input. How many of you guys have ever searched on Pinterest and you've looked for sensory help? You've said sensory strategy, sensory tools, sensory calm down, sensory this, right? And you're just looking for more ways to do sensory input. Well, that doesn't always work because if you don't know the right input to use, it's not always going to help. You could be adding to the problem. So it's not just give more sensory input. Sometimes it's removing that input and not always adding to that input, right? The next one is that there's nothing you can do to help. They'll just outgrow it. No. If you don't help your kids become self-aware of their sensory needs and preferences, how are they going to advocate for those sensory needs and preferences? Maybe they might become aware of how people react to them. And they might stop doing it because they are embarrassed that they do it, but that need is probably still there, right? Sensory is just messy play. It's all about getting your hands dirty. No. Sensory is about meeting each of the senses needs, not just tactile. Many kids don't even like the sensory play. Now, this is the big one. This is the one I run into all the time. And this is that sensory is reserved for kids who have a diagnosis like ADHD, autism, ODD, something else. It's reserved for kids with a difference or a disability. It is not something that we all deal with. And we already talked about that. We all have sensory preferences. We all have likes and dislikes. We all have needs that need to be met. And so the more we know about it, the more we can empower ourselves and empower our kids. And then this last one happens so often. And this is just from honestly, it's from just not knowing, right? Is that you just need to discipline your child more. And if you are a student of Calm the Chaos, you already know that we see discipline as guidance and teaching. We don't see discipline as punishment and rewarding. And so, yes, you do need to guide and teach your kids. But no matter how many rules and stipulations you put on jumping on the furniture, if that need's not getting met, they're still going to do it. So this one is really, really important, is because once you take the time to understand, well, then you can empower yourself and your super kid to make a plan and to get those needs met like they need to. So that brings us to number 4, is that when you know more about sensory, then you can empower your kids. And so at the bottom, I have my little kids using fidgets, using visual schedules, using a swing, using a burrito wrap blanket, using headsets, pushing on the wall. When you know more about sensory, you can empower your kids. So let's do a quick recap of what we've talked about today about normal kids. So very first is number 1 is normal is overrated. Embrace your unique child. Embrace who they are. Embrace their preferences. And then realize that every single child, every single behavior, there is always a reason for behavior. Should it happen? Should they know better? Maybe. But there is always a reason for behavior. Always. And I am talking about adults. I am talking about the things you see in the world. There is always a reason. You might not agree with the way that they're doing things, but there is always, always a reason. And when you know that there's a reason, you can start to understand. And today we're looking at that from a sensory lens. There are other reasons. Not feeling safe, not being connected, not feeling heard, not feeling like their sensory needs are met, not having the skills. There's lots of reasons why, but today we're taking that very clear sensory lens and looking at that. So when you can start to understand, take the time to truly understand, you're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall when you empower your kid. You're not just throwing random strategies at your kid, random tools at your kid. You're taking the time to understand about sensory so that you can create a plan with them and you can empower them. And you can help them become self-aware of their own sensory needs. We also like to take these, bring them down and make them into a blog post. So you can always go to lemonlimeadventures.com. So now that you've learned a little bit about sensory, maybe this was new for you, maybe you learned something new today, we're going to be doing a couple more of these videos. Matter of fact, on Saturday, we're going to be doing a Super Kid Saturday all about explaining sensory to your kids and helping them be aware that senses play a role in what their behavior is. So that's our fun episode that Miss Caitlin and I are getting ready for Saturday. And then next week, we're going to be talking about how to deal with everyday struggles from a sensory perspective, how to create sensory strategies that are going to help your child. We're also going to be talking about how to deal with sensory overload and sensory overwhelm. And we're talking about this from a general 30,000 foot view of all kids. Okay, all kids, because I believe that all parents, all teachers, all grandparents, all aunts and uncles can do better when they understand that sensory is a reason for behavior. Be sure to follow Lemon Lime Adventures. Be able to tag your friends if you think that they might need to hear this. And I've already seen some of you doing that, and share it with anyone you think that needs to hear this. And I just want to close out by saying, if you are listening to this and you are thinking, but my kid, there's no way this woman understands my kid. His aggression's so crazy, his biting, his touching, his avoidance, her, her disrespect, her defiance, it's just awful. There's no way they understand. Or I am struggling so much that I'm hiding in closets and I'm having my own panic attacks. If you feel like no one can understand you, I want you to know that you are not alone. And while I might not have walked your exact footsteps, while I might have not have lived in your exact shoes and situation, we have a community of people who have lived very similar things to you. And while I know your story is uniquely yours, I do know that you can do this. And I do know that you have an army of people behind you ready to support you. All you have to do is reach out and they will be there to help guide you and support you and help you find your next right step. So with all of that, I've given you what you need to conquer your day. Bye, guys.